Hello and welcome to another episode of the Tom and Joe Show. This week we are this time we are turning to music, and we are talking about the Norwegian black metal band Ulver's 1994 album Bergtatt. Uh, so this is gonna be an interesting one because Joe.
Yes, hi.
Joe is here too. Joey will be here for this, although this is gonna be like I feel this is gonna be an
Yeah.
episode where I'm gonna talk a lot because this is like one of my favorite musical
You,
genres. um,
it's going to be mostly explaining things to me.
yes, because Joe has never listened to any Norwegian black metal at all. In fact, so Joe, tell me about your general tastes in metal, because I know you like some metal, but
Yeah, it's hard to tell things like what is metal and what is
mm,
not because there are like genre snobs that have 40 subgenres and this isn't metal, this fits into this part of, rock, or this is,
mhm,
rock opera, this is whatever it is. Um,
yeah,
the most familiar thing to this, I would say, is from the video game Alan Wake, which has the fake band. Oh God, I forgot what it was called, but the Old Guard of Asgard or something like that. It's something to that effect. But they have
the old gods of Asgard, yeah.
yeah, the Old Gods of Asgard, yeah, and they are in the game. They are a fake Norwegian metal band who has gotten too old and senile, so they are just taken to this little home where they constantly break out, and they have a Thor's hammer that is like a child's toy hammer that's plastic, goes squeak a squeak a squeak, and but as Alan Wake goes through, they go to their farmhouse, which suddenly comes alive, and it suddenly just breaks out into a Old Gods of Asgard song, and it's a completely awesome moment,
Mm,
and it's just you have to survive through the entire song, but what's being helped is like the pyrotechnics and all of that, so it's very mainstream
mm,
metal, as it
yeah.
were. It's like 70s. We're vaguely touching upon Norse mythology and
Yeah,
stuff like
sort
that,
of
but
like
we're
more the
completely
yeah,
Americans.
more the Led Zeppelin sort of end. So I feel I need
Yeah.
to sort of do some explain. So basically, let's start at the beginning. Norwegian black metal. Black metal is. I keep using the term Norwegian black metal because black metal is largely a subgenre of heavy extreme metal, originating in Norway in about the early 1990s. Now, I say the Norwegian strain of this sort of takes elements from from influence from bands like the British band Venom, the Swedish heavy metal band Bathory, Merciful Fate, etc., and the Swiss band Celtic Frost. So they are sort of they are what we call Norwegian black metal is in essence the second wave of black metal. It's like the new wave of British heavy metal is for things
Hmm.
like Iron Maiden. So
Yeah.
I guess we need to sort of talk about sort of what what is Norwegian black, what is black metal, how do we identify black metal. Black metal is sort of basically there are two key things I would say about it. One is a sense is what the sort of I guess the sensibility of it. So Norwegian black metal starts really with a band called Mayhem in early 1990s Norway. Mayhem are fronted essentially by a guitarist called Euronymous, who we'll come back to in a little bit. So essentially, he looks at Swedish death metal coming out of Göteborg, that sort of area, things like At the Gates, etc. And he goes, "That's a load of poser shit. Everything's really overproduced. Everything's very very clean, and sort of that is very much what." In essence, sort of is the main division between death metal and Norwegian and sort of black metal. It is in the production. So with a lot of black metal records, they are lo-fi production. It's usually very cheap sound. There's, so for example, Ulver, who we obviously are talking about today, would later go on and do an album called Nattens Magdrill, which is this very harsh, very unpleasant sort of sounding metal, which is all recorded on a 4-track recorder, allegedly in the middle of a forest. This is the sort of stuff we're dealing with here.
Mm-hmm.
So Mayhem then, in basically a lot of bands who started playing, Swedish style death metal in Norway. So, for example, like a band called Dark Throne, who have sort of gone on over the next sort of 15, 20 years to go into sort of more rock and roll with black metal influence sort of music. So a lot of bands sort of start to sort of, coalesce around Mayhem in the sort of the Bergen area of Norway. This is where sort of the genre gains its notoriety, because we need to. This is the other key element of black metal is it tends to be quite misanthropic. It has crossovers with theistic Satanism, theistic Odinism, and sort of other. And this comes to a head in early 90s Norway with an individual called Varg Vikernes, who is basically the greatest shithead in music, bar none. He is an extremely unpleasant, alt-right maniac who now lives, I think, in France, because and occasionally will pop his head above the parapet to sort of talk about how incredibly important his stuff is and how everyone else's poses. So this comes to a head in Norway with basically church burnings and the eventual murder of Euronymous, several of the sort of key people of the genre going to prison for multiple years, and the genre sort of slowly dissipating out, although not really losing its popularity by the sort of the mid-1990s. And here really Ulver come in. Ulver are a band. The Ulver formed in obviously in Bergen, and I think this needs to be sort of said up front. Ulver haven't been a black metal band for something like 2 decades, so they start out as a black metal band. They very quickly go through 3 albums, which are obviously this one we're talking about, an album called Kesselvanger, which essentially takes the track, the 4th track, which we'll talk about in a bit, which is this very nice acoustic thing, and basically do an entire record on that style. Then you get Nathan's Magdrill, which is obviously the very unpleasant heart, which is almost like the other side of the coin. And then it starts getting really weird. They then do a record called William Themes. This is a 2-disc album, which this is, as I said, this is not a genre that tends to do big dramatic works of art. This is like unpleasant, home recorded stuff. So they do a record called The Marriage of Heaven. Themes from William Blake's The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, which obviously takes the text of William Blake's The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, which is this very important book by the English printmaker William Blake, which is a set of biblical sort of esque texts, and basically it's a collection, an illustrated collection of Blake's sort of basically his beliefs, taking element, and it's sort of this mixture of strange sort of prophetic stuff, biblical stuff, and it's very and the genre takes a look at it and goes, what the fuck is that? Because it's this 2-disc record which sort of takes, it has electronic influences, it has industrial influences, it's got progressive rock influences, and avant-garde rock, and it's this 2-disc huge long album, and it's critically acclaimed, but it's clearly, at this point Ulver are going, no, we're not a black metal band anymore, which really sort of coalesces in their 1999 EP Metamorphosis, which obviously is where the band says, we're not a black metal band, we don't want to be stigmatized as much, we realise that the first two, that Bergtatt and Nathan's Magdrill are important to, black metal as a genre, but, quote, we wish to liken our association with said genre to that with the snake with Eve. Which is, I think, one of the most metal things I've ever said. So over about the next 2 decades, Ulver have steadily gone from an experimental electronica band to basically a synthwave band. which sort of kind of as I said, so they start and then they start really from about 2015, 2016 to start doing what I can only describe as sort of, you know, very 80s, very intelligently made sort of stuff, like I would say a slightly more avant-garde sort of, you know, Ultravox. It's the sort of, that's very synth heavy, very moody, very 80s sound. And this coalesces, this sort of is based, up to date. They have released Flowers of Evil in last August. Which is basically a full-on electronica album. And the thing is, they're very good electronica albums, but the distance that this band have come in like 25 years is frankly jaw-dropping.
Although I do respect that as a person who, this is especially gonna come to something when we suggest the next album I do for you.
Oh yeah, so. No, but so I guess we need to sort of talk about this album like in context. So this is sort of so before we get into sort of this album track by track, we need to sort of talk about what Bergtatt means to the genre. So Bergtatt's production is not typical for a Norwegian black metal record. It is well produced, very polished sounding. Notably, and this is a key thing with black metal, the bass is very audible. I mean, usually with black metal, it is very trebled out. It's a very hard, as I said, the whole sense of, you know, a black metal guitar tone and the way that most black metal sounds is to be unpleasant. It is a deliberate stylistic thing. But what Bergtatt is it sort of is this very symphonic, you know, this very clean in places, very well produced sort of sound, and this sort of basically creates a rather ubiquitous sound, particularly in sort of North American black metal, with bands like Alagok and the French band Alceste, where it is basically entire bands have built their sound around sounding like this record. And it goes, you know, this very reverb heavy, this very clean, this very harmonic sort of thing, you know, into which you get these interruptions of extremely loud and angry music.
I can get that because it's the folktale style of, you know, the acoustics and the reverb and the chamber you know, voices. It fits very well. It adds, you know, this layer of legendary, you know, folktale quality to this work, and makes it feel old, and it makes it feel like it has a weight to it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, let me give you a little bit of my background. So I friend in sort of secondary school, this is how long I've been into this band, introduced me to this record. Hello, Marcus, by the way. So yeah, this is sort of an album I have been listening to for about you know, a decade at least, if not like you know, nearly 2 decades. And this is actually one of the records my parents have listened to, which is sort of like, and I think it's their sort of thing. They sort of hear it, and they hear, obviously, because they're of an older generation, they hear a lot of progressive rock influences in it, which I don't know whether you would agree, if there's a sort of a proggy sound beneath, you know, the whole black metal sort of malaise of it.
Oh yeah, it definitely has that Stairway to Heaven kind of quality to, like, its quieter parts.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess we sort of talk about the people. So the vocalist of Ulver is a gentleman called Christopher Rigg. Christopher Rigg is the only continual member of Ulver. Now, we talk about this choir effect, and this is sort of very interesting. So Ulver, as with a number of black metal bands, did not play live until well into this electronic phase, you know, about 5 years ago. That vocal effect is created by him stacking his own vocals on top of each other. Yeah, so it's this quite sophisticated sound for sort of, as I said, this genre. So yeah, the sort of and again, it's sort of got instruments you wouldn't expect on this. So there is a pianist on this called Sved, who, like a number of other people on this records, are members of another black metal band called electronic black metal sort of experimental band called Arcturus, which Rig was a vocalist for a period. You have Hugh Mingay, who is otherwise known as Skoll, who is also the bassist for Arcturus. A lot of Norwegian names. Havard Jornsen, who is also known as Havard, who is also the guitarist for another black metal band called Satacon. Yeah, so it's it's a surprisingly tight sound. So I suppose we should just get on and start talking about this, because this is going to be just an interesting thing. So the first track.
Just to say what I just intentionally went into this album knowing nothing, just to experience the album, just to like get one end of the spectrum to the other. This is not me being lazy.
No, absolutely. I mean,
I did this. I made an intentional choice.
No, absolutely, and I think it's like, this is the thing. Like, I find with black metal as a genre, it's a lot of it is good, but a lot of it is, it's you got to remember, this is the most of the people in the sort of the black metal genre in about the early 90s were, including Ulver, kids. Ulver are 18 and 19 when they're making this record. We're not talking, we're talking about something that is, reasonably sophisticated, but with a lot of the black metal genre, it's like, it's basically very far. It almost sort of floats off into a very fast and very nasty sort of punk angle in a way. This is definitely, and I mean, again, sort of just to a more casual listener, this is sort of like, this is not a typical black metal record. Do not come to black metal expecting more like this. There is more like this, but it's not as common as, what makes up the majority of the genre. I mean, there is the only other band I would probably immediately recommend of this genre is a band called Emperor, who again, sort of, their vocalist, who is a guy called Ishan, has gone on to do, basically experimental metal. It's a lot of Norwegian black metal. I'm going to be honest, and this is where I sort of duck the flying fruit. It's not very good. It's like, it's there's a lot of things with black metal. It is a very much a genre based on, for lack of a better word, the ambience. It is for, there is a sense of, this is how a bunch of disaffected, teenagers to young adults in a country that's dark half the time, where there isn't very much to do, where, most of the people are living within 2 or 3 very large cities, or villages. It's music of alienation. It's, it's in the same way that grunge in the 1990s reflected, the disaffected youth of Seattle. This sort of reflects the disaffected youth of 90s Norway.
Mm-hmm. It's very weird because this, I mean, now that you've said that, I can see why that's different, because this is telling a story. This is a narrative.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not, we're angry and God sucks and
go
fuck yourself.
No, and I think that's what marks this album out doubly. I think this is what marks Ulver out generally. There is, even on Nathan's Magdrill, where there is, this incredibly dense, nasty, tripled out guitar tone. It has a heft, it has a narrative. You experience the flow of the music. A lot of black metal, in all fairness and all honesty, is. It is tonal. It's it is to create a mood, and what the lyrics are sort of feels are usually quite a lot of the time secondary.
Mm-hmm. And that is kind of where I kind of went with this record and didn't win with the record because the first time I listened to it, it was just I'm going to put this on. I'm going to just straight listen to it. I'm not going to see the lyrics. I'm just going to see how it feels. And it was hard to tell how it felt because it it followed a narrative and it was edited like it followed a narrative. Like you would have the harsh vocals come in, and then there would be the interlude with the acoustic guitar, and then there would be this part that's harsh and terrible, and then there would be the instrumental interlude while the main character is running and stuff like that. So, and then the second time I listened to it, I tried to follow the narrative, and I had the lyrics in front of me, and I was looking at it, and it's just like I kept getting lost because there would be various vocalists, or it might be the same vocalist just doing different voices.
It's the same vocalist.
Okay,
it's
so it's the same
throughout.
person singing through all of this, but he's the choir, and then how he could tell the choir turned into who was the narrator, then they turned into the underworld people. He added a couple more layers to his voice, and that's how you could tell the difference in the first chapter. And then how you could tell it's the maiden is his voice turns a little lighter. And then in the second chapter, then we have his harsh vocal coming on, and he's singing over all of these people, like the narrator, the underground voices, it's all this. I was getting lost in that, and then like it took me forever to just follow the thread of this, and which is unfortunate because it is very simple. It is simply a Norwegian folk tale of a woman who gets lost in the woods and then eventually gets taken by goblins and the beings of the forest or what have you. And the narrative got very confusing to me, not just because it was just like there are multiple. There's this one vocalist who was doing constant different voices, and then it's like in the fourth song, then the maiden actually has somebody talking, and then the voice actually has a voice that sounds like the creepy voice of the forest, and I just had to sit in front of, follow the lyrics line by line. Who is saying this? Where is this? And it got a little messy for me because I am.
We should point out at this point.
I am a writer.
And
I am a writer for trained as a journalist. So it's like there are a lot of things that shouldn't, like poetic folktale. It's like the folktales of Norway and Russia. A lot of stuff happens, but it doesn't feel like a lot of character stuff happens. So it's just like this woman gets a skull and that she can use to see in the dark of the forest, and then she goes to here, and there's not a lesson. There's not a lot of character stuff. There's not. It's just stuff happening, and as far as this is very simple, but they say a lot to say a very little, and I just know there are copy editors in my life who would go, couldn't you just pare this down a little bit? So
I should point out at this point, like, all of this is in Danish, and not like normal Danish.
Okay.
It's in medieval Danish. It's in like it is like I don't know, like a British band doing an album, but it's in Old English, or an Icelandic band doing it in Old Norse, and I know for a fact that there probably is an Icelandic band who's done it. But it has this extra layer of like abstraction to it, and it's like I think this might genuinely be one of the first times I've actually listened to it with the lyric sheet in front of me, because it's like. Here's the thing with this record. It is a mood. It is very much, these 5 very well pieced together sort of pieces of music, and I say this in like the nicest way. I think black metal lyrically is, lyrics are an additional thing. It's like lyrics in very heavy metal, things like death metal
Mm-hmm.
and grindcore, where it's just like the vocals are just an extra noise over the top.
It's
And
just to emphasize the mood and put
yeah,
in words that emphasize that mood.
yeah, oh, absolutely. That said, so should we go through this track by track, because I think we've got to a point where we can sort of we've laid
Okay.
the groundwork. So
Sure.
this album starts with probably one of the best black metal tracks ever written, which is Trollskog Fahren Wild, which translates as Lost in the Dark Forest, which is, I feel like this is like, as I said, if bands have, spent their entire, careers trying to recreate this sound, it is trying to recreate the sound of Trollskog Fahren Wild, because it starts with this drum solo, and you go and it
Yeah.
goes and the dynamics on it just go holy shit, because it's like it goes from and it sort of it immediately gives you this sense of this wide almost cinematic sort of sound. It has this very good guitar riff underneath which sort of drives the song on for about the first half of it. And two things about this: one, you can hear the bass, which I've said before, this is not typical for a black metal record. Two, you can this is really well produced. I mean, partly I listened to a really good remaster of this. The band have also done a remaster which they released alongside their other two black metal records, but this is impeccably produced. Like, there is, the dynamics of this song, it goes through these sort of, these moods. It has a very fast, it has a very, big intro riff, and then it sort of goes into sort of different riffs, and it sort of almost has this bit about 5 minutes in where it almost it goes this really punky, upbeat sort of riff, and it's like, this is like, for a genre that is mostly tremolo picking high speed, it's like it has dynamics, which I feel is something that's missing from a lot of this genre.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff I'm, tentatively been introduced to has just been, it feels like it's a lot of noise and it just surrounds me and it's just like back the hell off. I know that's that's the point. Is it is hitting a mood for people and surrounding themselves. It's kind of like a cloak, and it's just like this is me. This is my emotions, and since this is not my emotions, it just kind of like it's invading my space, and that's my problem with stuff. I have not dived into this, obviously. The whole point of this is here. I am an experimental guinea pig.
Yeah. What did you think of this track? Because I feel like this is like the most, apart from like the fourth track, this is probably like the most mainstream that this goes. I feel, because it is basically, it's the vocals are cleans throughout. The dynamics are good. There's nothing too harsh going on. It all sounds actually quite pleasant in a way.
Yeah. My thing is, I'm all right with it. The sudden cuts in mood kind of bother me, just because I am ADHD as hell. So when it's in this one mood or it's in this one, and it will happen three or four times in one song where, you have the opening, drums and, slightly guitar in the background. And it's all very good and it's very melodic, and then suddenly acoustic guitar, and it's like, oh, we're going here, and then it's like, oh no, we're back to here. And then we slip into chapter 2, and it's like the screaming vocals come in, and it's all it expresses a mood, but it inconsistently expresses a mood, and that gets to me after a time. I really do like chapter 4 because it is a singular emotion, and it is a single scene where it feels like other stuff is like going through, here is what she's feeling right now, here's what she's feeling right now, and here's what the goblins or the beings of the woods are seeing, and it just kind of like cuts from emotion to cuts to emotion to cuts to emotion, and that stacks a little too high for me. It just I you have to pay attention to listen to this, and I don't have time to like. Here I am. I'm going to pay attention, and I'm going to listen to this album. And because of my mental illness, that's a hard thing to do. Begin with.
No, I understand.
Cannot
Yeah.
listen to a record.
Yeah.
It's either I have to interact with what is happening in it, or I have to be doing something else.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I get
No.
music snobs will probably not be a big fan of that,
No.
but
Yeah.
that's how it's got to be.
Yeah. I mean, this is very definitely an album. This is not like, you can't, there are a couple of tracks on this that you could go, this is probably a decent single, but, removing it from this concept, from this sort of this whole mood piece. So this album is barely half an hour long, which is like, which I think it actually works to its favor, because if it, I feel if this had been stretched over, 8 or 9 songs, it would have gone, yeah. So my favorite track is actually Capital 2. Capital 2 is probably, it starts out with this very good, this very sort of flute section. You think, oh, this is, and then it just drops this basic, this maelstrom of sort of, typical, and this is probably the closest they come to typical Norwegian black metal, is they, this sort of, but it still has these moments. It goes, it comes up to this nice, almost bridges section, and you get, and Garm goes back to the cleans, and it's like, holy shit, this is good. I mean, you got to remember, I got like, to nearly a decade and a half, 2 decades, but this is like, and I hate to sort of use this analogy. It is very much, sort of like, and this is probably what you get from black metal, probably not very much. It's adventure music. It's going, oh my god, this is like, you could imagine some rather sneaky, Hollywood film about, Hollywood fantasy movie using this without much trouble, because it's, it has that sort of sense of scale. It has the epicness, to it. And then we get to Capital 3.
Yeah. The thing that it reminded me of was the soundtrack to Nier, which is not the metal parts, but the flute section.
Oh no, absolutely.
And the folk sections. This is very much like the soundtrack to the first Nier, which doesn't have too much electronic influence, but it's very folksy, and it's very much follows it narratively, or like, I don't want to say cinematically, because there are video game composers who like hate cinematic view of music, because it's just like, that's not what they do here. But the music is made to fade in and out as the scene is going on. Like, if you are in this bar and you are on the second floor, you aren't listening to the singer in the bar.
Yeah, you listen.
And then you go down, and then it layers the vocals on, and that's what it reminds me of. It is an evolutionary kind of thing that changes as when we're going from perspective or mood, or if there's a lull in the running around the forest, or what have you.
Yeah. And then we get, as I said, we get Capital 3. Capital 3 is interesting, because it does something which, still feels, with my years with this record, absolutely outrageous. It then goes into basically, from this, very harsh black metal, we get this section about halfway through the track where it basically turns into an audio drama for like a minute and a half. And you get this very, very light piano from Sflares. You get this running, this Foley sort of running around, and it's like, holy shit, you've actually put aside this driving maelstrom of your music, of this this impenetrable wall of guitar and bass and vocals, to give your vision of this this fairy tale a little bit more, this sort of very dreamlike, strange thing, and then it goes straight back into it. I mean, I think
Yeah.
there's a canon somewhere on this, because you get this section, it just goes this loud bang, and I'm still, to this day, have not quite worked out what the loud bang is, whether it's,
It's supposed to be thunder.
Oh, okay, it's going to be
Um,
thunder, is it bang?
yeah, it's like
Oh, okay.
when howling wolves do sing thunder rolling, and then
Boom.
bang, fear rides in the air.
I'm pretty sure it's a gun. Somebody's, like, fired a gun in
Okay.
the studio or something, but it's good, and it's sort of like, I admire a band that can go, in a genre that sort of goes, production is, elitist, everything, if you haven't recorded this in the middle of the forest while sort of, sacrificing a goat, you're not, part of this scene enough. Which is, I think, this problem with black metal. Black metal has this real weird thing about, basically, I would call the sort of vaguely a concept called Kvlt, KVLT, which obviously, is a weird sort of bastardization of cult, which is, the idea that if your black metal music is not, this raw elemental thing, if you have Gasp, and actually if your Gasp released on a major label as Satacon were, Satacon ended up on, I believe it was Sony Records, this band from like the middle of fuck ass nowhere in Norway, suddenly on Sony, on a major label and record, not a subsidiary label, as the genre sometimes does, but on like actual Sony Records. And it was like, oh, you're sellouts. You're doing this. You have somehow, and it starts getting very silly with this. You get it in every genre, but it's particularly silly in this one. It's going, oh, because we have recorded in the middle of a forest at 3 a.m. in the morning, and have like subsisted on sacrifice goat for 2 months. Our record is therefore more. It's
real, man.
It's real Norwegian black metal, not this stuff that sort of, you get, these music videos. No, we're going to go out into the middle of a forest with Super 8s and sort of run around and yeah, this is the thing with black metal. I feel it's a genre that sort of takes itself a little, and yeah, a lot of music genres take themselves seriously, but when you're sort of running, screaming about Satan, or somebody in like, because this is the other thing with black metal. A lot of black metal musicians have, when they do play live, and some of the bands obviously don't play live, have corpse paint. And corpse paint is, I guess, what you would is this sort of weird sort of Kiss, and I feel like Kiss is a huge influence on this. It's this sort of Kiss-esque, usually black and white stuff, and you got these guys running around forests, dressed in these things with like spiky bandoliers, and people wearing carrying around LARP swords, making music about sacrificing your daughter to Satan, and it's like, guys. So yeah, then we actually get to the track that you liked.
Yeah, and this is the full one where it's doing the narrative and it's giving the vision to this. So that's probably why I like it, because I do like the narrative. I think what this album most harkens back to, for my experience, is Protomen's Volume 1, or Act 1, I should say. Or it's just, the album was called The Protomen.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we need a little bit back. So Protomen, tell us about Protomen, because this is...
The Protomen are people who made a rock... Their entire focus is making a rock opera out of the video game Mega Man. And it sounds like the silliest shit in the world, and then you listen to it, and holy shit, this is kind of awesome. And the first one is very much indie rock, very rough. We don't have, like, the resources, but they are making a story out of Mega Man, who discovers this past where, the villain, Dr. Wily, took over the city and, took his brother, who tried to fight back, and it's very narrative, and it has all of these characters, and sometimes it's the same person doing a different voice, and that's and that's kind of what it reminded me of. It's like, once you get to Act 2, The Father of Death, it is extremely polished rock opera. I mean, this could be, you could put this on Broadway.
Yeah,
if you
these guys have covered Queen, as you've showed me in the past, and done it damn well.
Yeah. So it has that rough, very rough quality. Sometimes you're not really following the narrative, and sometimes it's about, the mood.
Hmm.
And when it best comes together is when the narrative and uh, the music are sort of coming together to make the scene, as it is in chapter 4 here.
Hmm.
I use the English
Yeah.
translation for stuff. So
I'm not
it
even gonna
voice
try and pronounce.
beckons,
Yeah, I'm not even gonna try and pronounce the. Oh, I'll go fuck it.
and
Capital EV in stem locker. I'm
but
probably sorry, Norway. Sorry for like mangling your lovely language.
yeah, I try not to do that. But anyway, um, so it is just this scene where the woman the t- in this is talking to the voice in the darkness that represents, the goblins, the beings, and is trying to coerce her, trying to lure her into the darkness. And that is just this entire scene. And it actually, when the maiden speaks, it is actually a woman
Yeah.
speaking. And, the voice, it's not like the chamber choir, it's not the scream voice. It is actually a quiet voice
Yes, it
trying
is.
to lure her.
So the
And
vocalist
it
is.
is all very
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
It is all very well done.
Hmm.
And it's just this one scene, this one mood, and it's not constantly shifting on me, and I'm not like, where am I now? I'm
Why
and
is
that was my reaction
yeah,
anyway.
why is this man screaming at me in medieval Danish? Yeah. So the female vocals on this are done by somebody who has like no Wikipedia article. They are called Lil Catherine Stenstrud, who is also the flautist on this album. So yeah, everyone's pretty much doing double duties on this.
Hmm.
And then we get to the end of this album, and this final track does like almost as much as the entire album before. It almost shifts back, and it almost is like, and this is gonna sound like again like a really strange thing. It's like the end of Act One reprise in a musical, where you get all the ideas that have been in
Hmm.
this album up to this point, you sort of brought back, and you get this very fast drumming. You get the sort of the sort of the more the cleans, the harsh vocals, um and then you get what is probably the most sort of bizarre moment, the sort of the most interesting element on this album, which is this like full minute coda guitar piece, which is like it's just really really nice, and it's sort of very restful, and it sort of almost feels like a prelude to the next record that they do, is Kesselvanger.
Hmm.
So yeah, I love this record. I mean, I will.
Okay.
I used to have this on a playlist with about another 4 or 5 albums, and I would listen to this over and over again. During autumn and winter. Is a very autumnal sort of winterish album. It's not height of summer music. It is dark and it's cold, and it's sort of a little bit forbidding, and a little bit it's not music for the sort of the middle of the day. It's music of sort of darkness and the mountains, so to speak.
Okay. I don't think I'm going to seek this album again. It's like I don't regret my time with it.
No.
It's fine. It's fine. It's 18 to 20-year-olds putting together a narrative black metal, and it works to that effect.
Yeah.
It's just uh, it's just the constant cutting of moods and the constant shifting. It kind of bothers me, and I can't. I need to have my space settled for when I'm working on stuff, because otherwise, if my mind gets jolted around, it's just gonna go, hey, what's this, what's that, and it's. I mean, it's me. I mean, I might seek out their folk album.
Yeah.
That's just the folk stuff.
Yeah, I would.
And
I can imagine if you like. I mean, this is almost a general thing. If you listen to this and you like A Voice Is Calling, go listen to Kesselvanger, because it is one of the best folk metal albums ever put. And there is not a guitar, a electric instrument anywhere on it. It is entirely folk and a cappella. It's really, I mean, it's probably actually, I
Okay.
would almost say it's actually better in places than Bergtatt. It is certainly more. It is and this is the thing. I feel like Bergtatt is, it's like I'm trying to give it a comparison. And actually, I've covered. Bergtatt is black metal's Nevermind. A lot of bands look at it and go, "We could do something as good as that." But the thing is, Nevermind isn't Nirvana. Nevermind is is the sort of, it may be the most famous Nirvana record, but it is also, an album of compromise. It's an album of sort of, and the thing is, this is a lot of 90, early young adults making a record, and in places it's amateurish, in places it's sort of like, you know, you have elements like, the songs that have got so many ideas crammed into them. And the vocals are, basically rely on this layering because you got an 18, 19-year-old vocalist. you know his voice has got better and better on newer records, and he doesn't do the death growls anymore, but he obviously he has a he and it's a perfect snapshot. Ulver would within 3 years of this record being released would quit the genre altogether and go off and do weird and interesting and exciting things, for the next 20 years. But there's a sort of, there is a charm to it. It is, so many bands have looked at this record and taken it as influence. It still stands as probably one of the best, musically and otherwise, records from the black metal genre. It's still a remarkable piece of music. But you got to sort of remember, this is a record Ulver made 25 years. Ulver, have left this like, they left black metal years behind in their career. It's part of their past. There are more musical things off in the distance for them to explore.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, I think, the first episode we've really disagreed on something.
Yeah, kind of, sort of.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. I mean, it's like
I'm not going to say I dislike it. I'm just going. It, and it's probably chicken shitting out to say it's not for me.
No,
but,
that's fine. I mean, I felt this was a risk worth taking. I mean, it's like this is and I will agree. When you get to metal, the extreme verges of metal, you are entering music that is not, designed and deliberately, in the case of black metal, for mainstream interest. It's angry, disaffected people writing for angry, disaffected people 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, and I was disinfected, but not in that way. And
no, I get that.
I'm trying to figure out what ways of disaffected, like, weirdly enough, my favorite album was version 2.0 Garbage, which is basically a woman who has been unleashed upon the world. Like, if the first Garbage album is Raw Youth, is version 2.0 is you're in your 20s and you are first unleashed on the world and you have no idea what the fuck you're doing, but you think you know what you're doing, and that kind of thing.
Which I think which I think actually sums this album up quite well. It's like, we've done, we did that before this. Ulver did like one demo, and the demo is sort of, it's a demo. Nobody is particularly caring what a band's demo looked like unless they're, that's all they did. It's solid, but this is sort of like, this is okay. We have a vision, we have an idea. We're 19 and 20-year-old, we're 18 and 19-year-olds. We have the ego, the attitude, and the belief that this is going to be a good, something that works. And you got to admire for this. I mean, how many, records by 18 and 19-year-olds basically are the cornerstone for an entire genre?
Yeah. And it's just not for me, and that's okay. Everything is okay. I'm just there. I mean, everybody's going to be like, I'm not real enough, or, whatever. I'm going to go back to listening to the fixes. One thing leads to another, or,
Yeah.
starships. Nothing's going to stop us now. But
Yeah.
my best advice is, forget what's real and forget what's not. Just get what's you.
Exactly.
And
that's the thing.
it's a hard thing. I mean, it's be yourself, and it's the cheesiest shit in the world, but it is absolutely
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
It's.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I agree with you. Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to find a complete thought, and I'm trying to be poetic, and my mind is not letting me. But
Yeah.
there is this, kind of thing about being real, and I like real bands like The Clash. Well, The Clash were created like any other boy band, and they just happened to create this punk music that really struck a nerve, and you really just gotta find your own thing that strikes your nerve, and then be you, because there's nothing more powerful than just doing that and living that, and people will have no choice but to respect that.
Yeah.
Getting there is extremely hard, but there is a part of me that is 80s cheese, and that is a part of my identity, or early 90s house that, people rejected when grunge came along. But then the Japanese were like, oh, this never left. We're going to make this the soundtrack to Streets of Rage 2. And then that's going to be, and we're going to bring this music back to you, but you're not going to know because it's video game music.
Oh, shit. And not to mention Eurobeat. Oh, God. But no, and that's the thing. Like, I feel like it's nice to bring, a record to you, and you go, I have never heard this before. This is now like a record I really like, and I admit that, like, that not every record we sort of recommend, not every episode of anime, not any anime series, not everything we talk about on this show we are going to agree with 100%. I like I like that, because it's like,
and that's fine. That's okay. But we're also not going to be like screaming at each other, which is probably why our numbers are not going to be great. But it's that being able to have a discussion about it, and just having that space, which is great.
If you are an angry Norwegian in the comments, we do apologize for mangling your lovely language, and generally.
Well, you mangled it. I did the English translation.
I did my best. I am not Kavol.
Yeah, the album title means spellbound, by the way.
Yes, Bergtatt. Yes, Bergtatt. You will? No, I'm not gonna try it.
Please stop.
Please stop. So, what have we got next time?
Well, speaking of interesting mood changes, and just constantly being all over the place and trying different things, and we have DJ Shadow's The Outsider.
Oh boy.
which is after making a seminal album and a really good follow-up, both critically acclaimed by super white critics who sitting there at music snobs and are like, yes, this is quite good. He did music that essentially told these people who are trying to pigeonhole him, I'm going to skull fuck your ears until you can only hear a high-pitched whine.
Wow. But before that, what are we doing next time anime-wise? I'm now trying to remember.
We're doing yours. We're doing your choice. I keep forgetting the title.
I keep forgetting the title, haven't it? Shit. This doesn't usually happen, I swear.
It's something, it's something cross. It's not like Hunter x Hunter, but it's like it has that cross in it.
Oh God, I'm gonna try and pronounce it. Auharu X Machine Gun.
Yeah, I am going to need that in print so I can search it and find it and get to that, because I am terrible at foreign names, as you can tell.
Yep. I mean,
there it is.
There it is.
Auharu Cross Machine Gun.
Cross Machine Gun, yes. It should be interesting.
I mean, that cross is supposed to be a cross, and unless you're talking Hunter x Hunter, then you're just supposed to ignore the cross, and it's just Hunter x Hunter.
Oh God. Oh, sorry, Hunter x Hunter.
It's not confusing at all. There are no rules anymore.
My God. Anyway, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. So before we go, just the usual. If you like this episode, like what we do, we can be found on the internet at patreon.com/ the Thom and Joestar, and Thom is spelled with a H, like Thom Yorke of Radiohead. And you can also find us online on Twitter at Twitter. Whoever tries to remember our Twitter handle, I need to start doing this as like a thing. Twitter handle, which is at not so final prod. Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to thank you for the show, for tuning in. We will see you next time. Thank you again. My name is Thom.
And I'm Joe. And don't be a woman who wanders off into the woods. You will die. There are so many things that are telling you not to do this.
Yes. Until next time.